Well over a year ago now, my son and I were asked if we wanted to have an exhibition of our work in the Dock Street Studios in Dundee. We agreed, I think without really thinking too much about it at the time or what was involved, and the exhibition was due to be held in April this year. Sadly, because of the pandemic, it was delayed until September, and even then it was held under circumstances which were not ideal. However, there was quite a few people that said they couldn't come because either they were shielding or they couldn't travel. And I promised that I would do a fairly short online tour of the exhibition to let you see some of the work that was up on the walls and give a little bit of a flavour of what the whole exhibition was about. So I'm going to take you back to August this year. The final touches have been put together on the prints and the framing and so on, and I'll take you around the exhibition. I hope you enjoy it. So this is literally the last photo that's got to be taken up to Dundee. And we're doing a few limited edition images, so they're all going to be signed and numbered. So that's the last thing on the list really. So I think let's do it and get all this all packaged up and ready to go up on the train tomorrow. So I'm going to start with some of Andrew's photos, and this particular one was taken at a beach called Seacliff, which is out in East Lothian. We went down to get sunset, and although there's a bit of colour in the sky here, it wasn't that amazing. So we found that the tide was really high that day. The waves were crashing in right up to the dunes at the back. So luckily I think we had our wellies on, we managed to stay reasonably dry, but with the waves crashing in and out we got some good photographs of the moving water, and we still got a little bit of pink in the background, and you can see the effects of the long exposure smooths out the inrushing waves, but you still get the clarity on the Bass Rock over here. And this one, which is behind me, this is Callanish on the Isle of Lewis. We were on a family holiday, and the first night we arrived in Lewis, it just looked like there was going to be a really interesting sunset, and we all jumped back in the car and drove just a few miles up the road to the very famous Cavendish Standing Stones. And just as the sun was setting, and Andrew managed to just catch the sun as it disappeared down between these stones, and we managed to get a little sunburst moments before it disappeared. So this is quite a popular photograph. So this is what I've kind of called the awards collection, because all these photographs along this whole section of wall are photographs that Andrew's either won awards with, or has been commended, or has been shortlisted or runner-up. This was the first photograph that he really took. It was on the shores of Loch Ossian very early one morning when we were on a camping trip, and he took it with a tiny little point and shoot, and he went on to get it published in the Scottish Nature Photography Awards book, which was fantastic. This one was taken at the side of Loch Morlich, which is in the Cairngorm, and we had been climbing Cairngorm that day, raced down to the shores of the loch just at sunset, as we saw the mist just starting to hang over the water, and we got quite a few photographs that day. This one went on to be shortlisted in the Outdoor Photographer of the Year competition, which is quite a prestigious competition, and it has amazing colours in the sky, with the purples and the oranges and the yellows, and these rocks give you, in silhouette, give you the foreground interest. So that's turned out to be a really good image to capture. This image of Andrew's was taken at Cape Wrath, and he went on a trip with his mum during the summer holidays, and it's really captured the stormy weather that was around at the time. These huge rain clouds coming in over the hills in the background and just kind of wiping out the landscape beyond. It's really quite dramatic. It went on to win him the junior title of Scottish Nature Photographer of the Year. So if you know us, you'll probably know this photograph. This was taken in the village of Musselburgh, not too far from where we live, on a Sunday night, Mothering Sunday it was, 2017. We had an amazing aurora, one of the best we've ever seen that night, and we went along to this little skate park just as it was starting to fade in the background. Andrew took this image, which went on to win him the Take a View UK Young Landscape Photographer of the Year award, which is quite an accolade. This is probably Andrew's most famous photograph. He took it when we were on a family holiday to the Uists, and one quite wet and dismal day we drove all the way down to the island of Eriskay, right at the southern tip. And being a footballer himself, he jumped out of the car when he saw this view and wanted to take a photograph of the pitch. It went on to win him the Scottish Nature Photography Awards, the junior title, and the Young Scottish Landscape Photographer of the Year competition. It was featured by FIFA, of all people, on their Instagram feed, and it got about 90,000 likes or something. And then was also featured by the BBC and his own page that he got, its own feature that he got on the BBC website. So it's been sold many times over, and it's definitely one of his most popular. This photograph was also taken in 2017. We had been staying in the little village of Portnocky, which is on the Moray coast, and the weather all week had been horrendous, absolutely awful. But Andrew one morning got up before everyone else, stole my camera bag with all my gear in it, and I had to get up and try and chase him down to the shore in case he got swept away by the sea. I never did find him that morning, but on our last day of that week, the skies cleared, although the sea was still very, very rough. We had noticed that the rock here just lit up when the sun managed to get above the cliffs, which were behind us at this point. This was taken at New Year, so it's the middle of winter. And just taken a long exposure here, so the sea's smoothed out, but you can still see some movement in it. It's just an amazing photograph. And he entered it into various competitions and won the Classic View category in the UK Young Landscape Photographer of the Year. This one Andrew the title of the Young Scottish Landscape Photographer of the Year again, and it also won the Urban View category in the UK Landscape Photographer of the Year. So it's done very well. These two photographs were taken at the same time. We were on a holiday just for a few days to the Trussels in the autumn, and the weather was cold and crispy, and we woke up every morning to low mist. So we went down to Lochachry, which was just a few miles up the road from where we were staying, and Andrew took both of these together with the mist hanging down over the trees. And these were literally taken on a little point-and-shoot camera, which just goes to show that you don't need very expensive, fancy equipment to take some decent photographs. We're now into looking at some of my photographs. This is an interesting one because we were down at South Queensferry, a very cold, wintry day, and we drove past the Forth Bridges west to Blackness Castle. It was so windy, I literally had to hide behind the castle to stay upright. It was a wild, wild day. And as I was setting up the camera and the tripod, the aim was to get a photograph of the bridges just exactly as I've portrayed here. But somebody walking a dog further along the beach scared the oyster catchers, a flock of oyster catchers. They took off, and luckily, because I still had the camera in my hand, I literally just panned round as the oyster catchers flew across the scene. And when I got back to the studio, I purely by chance I discovered that actually all the photographs joined up very neatly. And so the oyster catchers you see here are actually the same oyster catchers you see here and here. They've just flown through the photograph 3 times. So it was a kind of lucky catch, but I really, really like this image. This is my version of the Seacliff photograph that I showed you earlier. Andrew's one is opposite, directly opposite in the gallery. Just to recap, we went down to Seacliff Beach. It's a private beach down in East Lothian, just along from Tantallon Castle, with the idea of getting the sunset. But the sunset never really came to very much, and instead we photographed the waves crashing in up the beach. And to create a bit of interest, we found various logs and rocks and so on to focus on. And here we've got two rocks in the foreground and the sea's gushing over and round it, creating these really nice patterns, which all come to a point. And then, kind of by luck, I managed to catch this wave just cresting and ready to crash back in again. So it was the best photograph that I got on that particular evening. And we printed it out on baroque gloss paper, which really intensifies the dark tones. So it's become a favourite of mine. So in the exhibition, we've got a number of framed prints for sale. You've seen quite a few of them already around the walls, but some of them we've just left unframed. And This is my kind of Scottish photographs that I left up on these. I've left up on these wires, and I just simply clipped to the wires to kind of fill up the space and allow us to show more photographs than we otherwise would. These were both taken actually from the top of Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh, looking out over the Firth of Forth. There were some big storm clouds coming in over from Fife, and I used telephoto 200mm lens to really zoom in and focus in on the detail of the clouds, which were just sweeping in one after the other over the Firth of Forth. And these two were taken in the Outer Hebrides on an island in Berneray. This was on the west coast, so just miles and miles of beach, beautiful long sandy beaches, but there were big rain clouds coming in and we got soaked on a couple of occasions, but still managed to pick out the colour of the water, which was just beautiful. And further up above the dunes, we've got the Machair now. Earlier in the summer it would have been covered in wildflowers of all different colours, all different types. But there were still these yellow flowers left in July, and for some reason they're in a big strip like this, almost like a kind of airfield landing strip. I have no idea why, but it really caught my eye, and it just gives the photograph some sort of direction, and it leads the eye into the distance. Over here we have a picture of the Bass Rock. It was taken from North Berwick very late at night in midsummer. The sky really hardly got any darker than that. But this was the sun was setting way over in the west. The Bass Rock has been lit up by the last moments of its glow, and it was quite an incredible sight. This one was actually taken very early in the morning. Also on the Firth of Forth. This is Carlingnose Point. This is an old pier that was used to deliver munitions during the World War II, I think, to provide protection for the Forth bridges, which are just kind of over here. And the sun just coming up off picture, but the sky was a lovely orange and blue colour, and we focused in on the seaweed in the foreground to give you that bit of detail. We built this installation in the middle of the exhibition really as a celebration of all the competition wins and commendations and so on. They're mostly Andrew's, obviously. So we have the first board here is a landscape photographer of the year. This is a picture of Andrew getting his trophy, which is this trophy here, handed to him by Rainiers down in London at the awards ceremony. We've got the book in question with Andrew's photograph of the skate park, and various other books and greeting cards and so on that are for sale. These are two photographs that I really like now. They're an example of my kind of later work. This one's slightly more abstract. This was taken up in the track up to the Hidden Valley in Glencoe on a very wet day where there really wasn't a lot of traditional landscape, big vista type images available. So Andrew and I were both there together, and we focused in on the waterfalls and the tumbling rivers and the burdens around us. And I really love this picture because partly because of the diagonal through the photograph, which always helps, but the softness of the colour on that dark day. We've printed nearly all these pictures out on a paper called Museum Rough. They were all printed by Loxley Colour in Glasgow. They've done a fantastic job. And it really makes the softness in the images stand out beautifully. This photograph was taken in the Cairngorms on a kind of late autumn day. There wasn't a huge amount of colour around, and we walked up towards the Larrard Grew through the Rocky Marcus forest, And on the way back, this was literally the only moments of sunlight that we got during the whole walk, and I managed to luckily just capture it in time. This is Andrew's version of the one that was taken up on the path up to the Hidden Valley in Glencoe. I got one very similar to this as well, because as soon as we saw this composition, it was obvious what we were going to photograph that day. We had to wait on the light. The Hidden Valley is up in this direction, and the light was coming down through quite a narrow glen, and we just waited until the light hit the grass here and the trees, and just caught it. So it's that walk produced quite a few very interesting photographs, none of which we really expected to take that day, because we were in Glencoe to look for the big grand vistas and the bushlet of moors and these kind of images. But we ended up looking at more of the intimate landscape instead. These two photographs of Andrew were taken at the same time. We were returning from a trip to Skye, and we drove through Glencoe, and the cloud was just hanging over. This is Buchlet of Moor, which I'm sure you recognise, but the cloud was just hanging over the tops of Buchlet of Moor, Buchlet of Beg in the background. And we stopped at the entrance to the ski centre and got our telephoto lenses out and picked these photographs out. These are Andrew's. I have very similar ones too, but it was particularly interesting to focus in on the ridges. So that ridge that you see there is this part of the photograph here, with the cloud just swirling around, softening the background, but it was clear enough that the sun was coming through, and it was clear enough that you could just pick out all the detail on the rocks and the snow as it leads up to the summit of the Buchel. So it turned into a really nice set of prints. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that very quick tour of the exhibition. A huge thank you to Sarah and everyone at the Dock Street Studios for looking after us and hosting us this year. So it was a fantastic experience. Hopefully next year, 2021, we will be able to get out more, and we'll get our work on some other walls and in some other galleries. And we really look forward to catching up with you and getting out with the camera a bit more often. So as Christmas is now approaching, have a great time over the holidays, Christmas, New Year. Enjoy it, and we look forward to seeing you in 2021. Bye for now.